I'd like to welcome Danilo Augusto Barboza de Aguiar from the Senado Federal of Brazil. I'd like to invite Luís Afonso de Melo from the City Council of Porto Alegre, Mark Stodder from Xcential Legislative Technologies, Tahir Farooq from the National Assembly of Pakistan, and Mr. Wade Ballou from the US House of Representatives. About the format of our debate today, I have designed 5 different questions to each one of you. I will invite you to answer in 3 minutes. And after you answer, I will invite all the other colleagues to pose their comments as well. So without further ado, allow me to start our first question to Mr. Tahir Farooq. Mr. Farooq, can you briefly describe the general framework within which the drafting office and the drafting process in your legislature takes place? And what are the main demands your office receives from members of parliament, from other colleagues and the technical staff, and even if that's the case, external users as well? Please, Mr. Farooq, you have 3 minutes. Mr. Farooq, you are muted.
Hello, am I open now? Yes, thank you so much for your opportunity once again to see you, as well as to the Mark once again. Coming to the question, first of all, I would like to introduce that there are basically 2 parallel systems where the legislative drafting in Pakistan is going on, because there are 2 separate systems for introduction of any bill or legislative proposal in the parliament. One bill is on behalf of the government, whereas the other bill is to be introduced as a private member bill. Any individual member who intends to introduce or put on his proposal for consideration before the House is also authorized to introduce in his personal capacity any amendment. The bill which is originated on behalf of the government, which is generally known as the government bill, is usually drafted at the concerned department and the Ministry of Law and Justice, vetted by it, and then it is put forth before the House for consideration and passage, and the whole process. The authenticity and evaluation of the same rests with the and responsibility for that rests with the concerned ministry or the department who has drafted that. The first stage of the 80% of the legislative business which is supposed to be done by the government is done at the ministerial level. The rest of the 20% legislative business, although I am just giving it a general percentage on the average of passage of it, although the 80% of introduction ratio is through private member bills, whereas 20% ratio is on behalf of the government bills. Not going to the ratio of passage and consideration for that bills. The rest of the bill for the facilitation and helping out all the members of the parliament in the private member bill is rest on legislative drafting wing of National Assembly, headed by me. The legislative drafting wing consisting of only 5 officers, supporting all the 342 members. Usually the members approach the legislative drafting wing, me or the secretary of the National Assembly, with their proposal, either oral or in written form, that they intend to draft that amendment in the concerned law. They usually don't bother either it can be drafted or it can be an amendment in the main law, or it can be addressed to rules existing over there, because rules are not supposed to be made by the parliament. That is the secondary legislation which is supposed to be done and drafted and performed by the concerned department at departmental level instead of coming to the parliament. Then we work on it. We just, if it is viable, we just prepare a proper draft and put it for the approval of the secretariat. After approval of the secretariat, we hand over it to the concerned member, if it is viable. If it is not possible, then we request the concerned member for some time for discussion. He comes over here for discussion. We try to brief him and convince him that the issues which you are agitating is not liable to be addressed through the primary legislation. These can be addressed through the secondary legislation, and we can move on for delegated legislation on that purpose. These are the basically issues with which the member came to approach us. At the same time,
Thank you. Thank you, Tahir.
Just 10 seconds only. At the same time, the staff supporting me along with the officers working with us, they have little bit confusion about the availability of the material, authenticity of the laws on web portal, because we have to rush to the library for research purpose, and that is the main issue which the staff is suffering, and that is the other issue on the other hand which the members are demanding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Farooq. Danilo, would you like to comment as well from your experience as the Chief Legislative Counsel in the Senado Federal of Brazil?
Bom, obrigado, Luís Kimaid, primeiro pelo convite, pelo prazer de compartilhar essa mesa com os colegas. Sobre o Brasil, a similaridade que o colega Tahir falou, também existe um amplo poder de iniciativa e de emendamento dos membros do Parlamento, do Senado Federal, no meu caso, ainda que o poder de agenda do Executivo prepondere, há um intenso trabalho dos parlamentares em emendamentos e em projetos de sua própria autoria. E na consultoria legislativa, nosso trabalho é justamente transformar essas ideias e essas iniciativas no formato adequado da redação legislativa, no formato de minutas de proposições de projeto de lei, de emendas à Constituição e resoluções. Também temos esse trabalho de esclarecimento e de orientação aos parlamentares, orientação técnica, para que eles adotem o melhor instrumento possível. Então, muitas vezes, a ideia ela pode ser realizada em outra forma, seja por meio de alguma indicação ao Poder Executivo ou simplesmente por meio de outras vias não legais, não normativas. Ainda assim, esse suporte ao trabalho dos parlamentares na Consultoria Legislativa é muito presente. Eu queria dizer que 80% das iniciativas legislativas do Senado Federal têm origem, ou pelo menos participação ativa da consultoria, e mais de 90% dos pareceres, sejam proferidos nas comissões, seja proferido no plenário. Então, nosso trabalho é muito próximo à atividade de fim do Congresso, e ele é cada vez mais intenso, porque apesar do poder de agenda do Congresso, o trabalho dos parlamentares tem sido cada vez maior e mais frequente, especialmente nessa fase pós-pandemia, em que os problemas se tornaram mais urgentes. Essa construção de um cenário pós-pandemia tem demandado muito dos parlamentares, né? Seja por conta da crise econômica, seja por conta da necessidade de resgatar programas e ações de políticas públicas que foram abandonadas durante esse período.
Thank you so much, Danilo, for your opening considerations. I'd like to invite Mr. Ballou. He's the Chief Legislative Counsel in the U.S. House of Representatives. Mr. Ballou, would you like to share your comments as well?
Thank you very much for having me on this panel. I've already learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to the rest of it as well. Not surprisingly, we also have many similarities in the legislative process. So I'll see if I can highlight some of the differences. One is that all the legislative power in the U.S. Resides in the Congress. So we only focus on members of Congress in their various forms, members themselves and the committees. Leadership gets involved. They, of course, are members. They primarily work through committees. Our function is a combination of advice and drafting assistance. That advice typically comes in the process of drafting. We have an order of priority of those things which are the closest to becoming law is what we work on first, so matters in conference. And then, interestingly enough, matters in committee come next. Committee is our main focus for matters that are under serious consideration. From the committee, our next priority will be for matters that are on the floor, and that would be drafting amendments for any member who would like to offer an amendment for the floor. And then finally, matters for introduction. We work for all members. We're nonpartisan in that sense. The real challenge for us is balancing the large number of member requests with our work for the committees. And then we do this by dividing our attorneys into subject matter teams. And so we have small teams who handle matters in their appropriate areas. So I believe that's it for this one.
Thank you so much, Wade, for your opening answer on this question. I'd like to invite Luis Afonso. He is the Legislative Director in the City Council of Porto Alegre. Luis Afonso, would you like to share your comments as well?
Agora sim, perfeito. As questões que nós temos aqui na condição de um parlamento local, né, elas, de certa forma, se repetem quase lá como acontece no Senado da República, né, como o Danilo acabou de colocar. E, na verdade, como ele disse, né, nosso processo legislativo brasileiro ele possui uma gama muito grande de iniciativas, né? Mesmo no nível local, nós temos uma grande possibilidade de iniciativa legislativa. Nós temos atualmente, né, a nossa Câmara tem 249 anos de existência e alterar a redação dos projetos para dar um tratamento melhor sempre foi uma luta constante aqui entre nós por causa das questões tradicionais. Os vereadores, de um modo geral, não gostavam muito que os projetos fossem alterados, né? Mas nós constituímos a evolução aqui, nós constituímos uma equipe de redatores que acompanham os projetos, que são minutas apresentadas pelos parlamentares, e dá um tratamento redacional, tanto do ponto de vista da linguagem como da técnica legislativa, né? Nós evoluímos bastante nisso, da década dos anos 2000 para cá. Hoje nós temos uma qualidade de texto que é bastante razoável. No entanto, permanecem alguns problemas. Hoje, nós não temos uma ferramenta que integre a redação do texto com o processo legislativo, né? Como todo aconteceu certamente em todo mundo, depois da pandemia, nós tivemos que adotar um sistema de processo eletrônico e fizemos uma adaptação de um sistema de processo administrativo para a tramitação dos projetos legislativos, né? Então, na verdade, o diálogo da elaboração do texto com a plataforma ainda é muito incipiente, porque nós temos que elaborar os textos num editor de textos fora da plataforma e depois colocá-lo dentro da plataforma. Ou seja, nós não temos ainda a possibilidade de dar tratamento final dos textos dentro da plataforma. Esse é um grande problema que nós temos e a gente gostaria de ter nossa perspectiva de futuro é encontrar uma ferramenta em que essa integração possa ser feita. É isso.
Thank you so much, Luis Afonso. Mark, before I yield the floor to you, I wanted to redraft this question to you specifically because you are our technology anchor here today in this panel. And basically, during the conference throughout the week, a colleague referred to the drafting process as the beating heart of the legislative process. I mean, it's most of the challenges and of the enablers to digitalize the legislative process, they come out on how you are drafting legislation. So my question to you is, how do you envision technology can help what the colleagues here just shared? Is it possible to make some of these challenges they shared easier or more effective using digital tools?
Well, I sure hope so. But first, let me say thank you for putting this panel together, and it's great to see many of you again from all around the world. And I think your question to me and then the question to the group really set the stage perfectly for what we'll be discussing over the next hour, in that as you listen to each answer, we hear some similarities, but the main similarity that you hear throughout is the complexity of the process. and the complexity in each of the jurisdictions. There are some fundamental similarities, Commonwealth traditions, US federal traditions, and so forth. But throughout there is that complexity. And yes, it does begin with drafting. And so from a technological perspective, we think about a few things to make things better. Number one is don't break it, because through the complexity, there is a great brittleness throughout it. And there are things that you cannot mess up. And so that's the first thing we approach. But you're always looking for not just greater efficiencies, but ways to make the processes stronger and more resilient and more sustainable. And so the hope is that through digitization, you can do that. It's not always possible. And a lot of it, most of what we're doing in legislatures and most of what we're doing in drafting offices involves human beings and people working together and figuring out how to work together. And you can't solve all of those problems through AI or through whatever the latest thing is. And so I think we always have to, from the technological perspective as a supplier to legislatures, is to have great respect for that and for these challenges. So I think to answer your question, yes, I think we can make it better, but we have to do it very, very carefully.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, for your opening considerations as well. Danilo, I'd like to pose a second question to you. I mean, as Mark was saying, and many other colleagues also shared during the week, a digital transformation is an investment that House needs to undertake, and it requires the technical expertise that you're representing here, but it also takes the political courage of the parliamentarians to undergo the institution through this process. And my main question to you here is, what are the main challenges your office is facing that is making you seek digital solutions to enhance your drafting process? So why are you seeking to modernize your drafting process?
Eu acho que os desafios são muitos, e eu queria primeiro enfatizar talvez o motor original, um dos motores para esse processo de desafios. Eu acho que a participação social por meio das redes sociais, das tecnologias de informação, tem trazido uma pressão, ou pelo menos uma cobrança muito grande dos parlamentos, que vem, pelo menos na perspectiva do Senado Federal, vem reagindo em duas frentes. Eu acho que um investimento importante é transparência, ou seja, fornecer aos cidadãos os textos e instrumentos legislativos de maneira clara e de maneira concatenada e de maneira informada, não somente os dados brutos e do processo legislativo, mas também informações sobre uma informação qualitativa sobre o que representa isso. Então, é importante no Senado Federal, que está nesse esforço também de digitalização do processo legislativo. Então, todos os instrumentos, todos os documentos legislativos entregues perante a mesa, ou seja o próprio projeto, as emendas ou os pareceres, eles são entregues já de maneira eletrônica e são disponibilizados imediatamente. E nessa página da matéria, onde todos esses documentos ficam disponibilizados, também ficam linkados ou disponíveis os estudos que a consultoria legislativa elaborou, ou até mesmo as notícias que a agência Senado, que é a comunicação social do Senado, preparou. Então, o cidadão, rapidamente, ele vai ter acesso aos documentos do processo legislativo, mas também a informações que vão ajudá-lo a compreender melhor. Eu acho que essa é uma das formas que o Congresso reagiu a essa busca de participação social por meio das mídias sociais. Mas tem um outro aspecto que eu acho que é mais interessante para a nossa discussão, que foi a intensificação do trabalho dos parlamentares em reação a essa participação social. Eles estão mais ativos e mais ativos na participação e mais preocupados com o reflexo de sua atuação na sociedade. Então, nesse sentido, foi muito nítida a necessidade o aumento de demanda no nosso trabalho da consultoria legislativa, por mais informação e por mais apoio técnico e também por mais textos legislativos para eles usarem, seja emendas, seja projetos, iniciativas de projetos propriamente dito. Então, isso aumentou muito a carga de trabalho da consultoria legislativa, o que nos levou a um outro desafio. Primeiro, conseguimos, com organização de gestão, com novos processos, melhorar muito a produtividade da consultoria, ou seja, trabalhamos em 2019 com um recorde de 15 mil trabalhos, coisa que nunca tinha acontecido na consultoria legislativa. Veio a pandemia, a demanda por trabalho, pelo volume de trabalhos reduziu-se, mas a pressão por urgência aumentou muito, então entregamos na média dos trabalhos relacionados à Covid-19 em até 2 dias úteis, nossa média de resposta, e muitos dos trabalhos entregues no dia seguinte, ou seja, conseguimos otimizar, da medida que foi possível, a prestação de serviços, mas compatibilizar, no momento pós-pandemia, 19 mil demandas, ou 15 mil demandas por ano, com um tempo de entrega desses, só com ferramentas de produção legislativa, de redação legislativa que automatizem, que evitem retrabalhos e que permita também elaboração de textos estruturados, que, como disse o Luís Afonso, que ele possa construir o texto já integrado dentro do processo legislativo. Ou seja, as emendas que você elabore aqui já tenham ligação com os projetos e com os artigos que vão ser emendados no projeto principal. Que os pareceres já sejam construídos a partir daquilo que é necessário dar parecer, ou seja, com as emendas que sejam as emendas que estejam disponíveis com os projetos de lei, com outros projetos que estejam apensados. Ou seja, essa integração do processo legislativo com as ferramentas de produção, me parece que é o grande desafio a ser desenvolvido para que a gente consiga responder a essas demandas da sociedade civil, refletida na intensificação do trabalho do Congresso Nacional.
Thank you so much, Danilo, for your considerations. Mark, would you like to comment on what Danilo just said?
Sure, just briefly, in thinking about why, what drives a legislature to modernize its drafting process and other processes, I think one of the things that stood out in what Danilo talked about, along with, that we want to do things better, we want to be more accurate, more efficient, and so forth. But I think there is great pressure on legislatures to meet its members and the public where they are today. And because we are much more digital society, because we're getting information more rapidly in forms that have replaced slower forms and more contemplative forms, to a certain extent, legislatures have to move there too, because the legislature and because what is happening there has to be the source of truth for so many things in society. Its tools, its digital approaches need to match where the public is. And so I think it adds further pressure for digitization. When members are expecting things to be on their mobile phones and be able to do what they're doing outside of government, to a certain degree, we have to be there as well. So I think that just adds to the continuing pressure to modernize and further digitize our processes and legislatures.
Thank you so much, Mark. Tahir, would you like to share your thoughts on this question and what the colleagues just mentioned as well? Tahir, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you so much. I would just like to add a few more things being the drafter, which I have observed. Basically, there are two main things which are required before drafting any bill. Originally, the data regarding the concerns of any member, which is available, which shows the need for drafting that bill, justification for that bill. In addition to that, you have to research where you can adjust that demand, in what law and what statute requires that amendment. The research as well as the data bank should be available quickly, because in the case of private member bills, while you are drafting bill for any private member, there is a demand for the quick response and expectation of the member that you have to quickly prepare the bill as per his demand. The quick response on behalf of the drafter is not possible without digitalization of the data bank and research books available on the record. Hence, I think the need for that thing can only be addressed, and the solution for that quick response to the member can only be done with the digitalization of the data bank, and the statute books repository should be available at your quick access point, so that you can save your time of rushing towards the library and searching in the manual way. it will not be the much hectic if it all should be in the digitalized form. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tahir, for your considerations. Wade, would you like to share your thoughts as well?
Thank you. We too are really challenged by outside pressures. And those outside pressures are resulting in the need for speed in the legislative process. Members' desire to respond to their constituents and to the events of the day. And that is a direct challenge to a more deliberative, thoughtful process in drafting a bill and an amendment. And so that itself is our huge challenge that we are working around. In a similar way of finding the right law and then understanding a bill as it moves through the process, there is a need for our more active members to be able to quickly understand what the initial proposal is, how it affects the current law, and then to follow how that proposal changes through the process when the process is moving rapidly. The old tools that and procedures that are in place, all paper-based, simply are not keeping up with the speed of the process, resulting for us in what in effect is a two-track system. The paper is being challenged to keep up with the legislative data as we are producing the PDFs. The bodies are acting and they're moving on to the next stage, and the official papers are trailing behind. So addressing that is a very big challenge for us.
Thank you so much, Wade, for your remarks. Allow me to invite Luiz Afonso to share his remarks as well. Luiz Afonso.
De certa forma, as questões que nós vivemos aqui, grande parte do Danilo já colocou. Embora ele tenha acabado comigo aqui quando ele disse que faz um projeto de lei em 2 dias, lá prepara o projeto de lei em 2 dias. Nós aqui tivemos um grande incremento da atividade legislativa decorrente da digitalização. Para uma média de 350 projetos anuais, 400, no primeiro ano da legislatura, esse número aumenta um pouco mais, porque entram parlamentares novos, têm um desejo maior de legislar. Então, na primeira legislatura, 350, 400. Agora, no primeiro ano, nós tivemos eleições locais aqui em 2020. Então, em 2021, essa cifra passou para mais de 700. E a nossa equipe de redação é a mesma. Então, de fato, e também tem a questão que o Danilo coloca das urgências, né? O parlamentar coloca o projeto hoje, que é sexta-feira, ele acha que a semana que vem vai ser votado, né? Então, isso, na realidade, também nos impõe algumas restrições de natureza material. E nós agora incrementamos a equipe da redação, mas eu realmente finalizo meus comentários dizendo que realmente o nosso grande desafio, e nós estamos trabalhando para encontrar uma solução, é uma ferramenta de produção, bem como você colocou aí. Nós estamos atrás de uma ferramenta que permita dar uma grande agilidade no processo, porque nós entendemos que a digitalização, ela não retrocede mais, ela só torna as coisas mais rápidas, né? E como os parlamentares também se apegaram muito bem a essa dinâmica que permite essa conexão com as redes sociais, então essa demanda a gente já percebeu que veio para ficar. Então se impõe mais do que nunca a adoção de uma ferramenta que possa permitir uma produção mais rápida e também uma melhor concatenação com os sistemas que nós temos. É isso.
Thank you so much, Luiz Afonso, for your closing considerations in this round. I'd like to pose my next question to you, sir. And my next question is, Finding a path to modernize the legislative drafting systems, it can be a challenge, as all of you mentioned on your remarks, by either respecting the traditions of the institution and including the colleagues, drafters that are not ready for the digital or are used to old word processing systems and in paper discussions, whilst bringing modern technologies to help to improve the quality of the work. Luis Afonso, starting with you, what are your recommendations to conciliate these two very different dimensions? On one hand, the institution's traditions and how colleagues are used to work on the legislative drafting area. On the other hand, these powerful modern tools that can help the legislatures to be more effective on their drafting system.
Bom, realmente vencer as tradições é um trabalho bastante penoso, né? Mas eu tenho uma sorte de que a equipe de redação da Câmara de Porto Alegre, em razão, obviamente, do transcurso do tempo, os servidores mais antigos, mais apegados à tradição, acabaram se aposentando, né? Porque houve um fator incidental aí que foi uma reforma previdenciária que levou os servidores mais antigos a buscarem a aposentadoria mais rápido, né? Então, nós somos com uma equipe, Luiz, relativamente jovem, trabalhando na redação, e isso nos facilitou muito, não é? Porque os jovens estão mais apegados aí à tecnologia, são mais abertos para a tecnologia, então a gente conseguiu isso, né? Nós temos um outro fator também que é importante, que é a legislatura nova, ela também, a idade média dos parlamentares baixou, o que também permite uma melhor compreensão sobre a necessidade de adequação das proposições. E, por último, eu gostaria de colocar um problema que já repetimos aqui, já falamos, é o problema que deságua na necessidade de ferramentas, né? Porque aqui no Brasil, embora o processo legislativo, as suas linhas gerais estejam delineadas na Constituição Federal, há um espaço para que cada Câmara Legislativa tenha a sua tramitação regimental mais específica. E o problema é que as ferramentas, que ainda são muito incipientes no Brasil, elas não admitem ainda uma adequada customização. Então, Luiz, para arrematar aqui a minha fala, eu diria que nós temos que evitar grandes esforços para conseguir obter essas ferramentas. Eu acho que fora de uma solução digital avançada, não temos como dar à sociedade a resposta, porque a resposta rápida ela não é só para os parlamentares, ela é uma resposta fundamentalmente para a sociedade, né? Então, realmente temos que investir em ferramentas para que possamos ter um processo mais sério, uma redação mais integrada e podemos dar essa resposta mais rápida à sociedade. É isso.
Thank you so much, Luis Afonso. Danilo, would you like to share your thoughts on this one as well?
Sim. As falas do Luis Afonso me trazem muita identificação, porque eu estou no Senado desde 2004, então peguei a fase da adoção dos processadores de texto em detrimento do setor de editoração, de mecanografia, como a gente chamava. Então, esse processo de pensar no novo processo, mas em função das pessoas que estão inseridas nele, é muito importante. Vivenciamos também, nesse período, uma primeira ferramenta de automatização de elaboração de textos legislativos, que terminou não sendo adotada porque não se alinhava, não se amoldava ao processo de trabalho da consultoria. Então, a gente tem uma ferramenta de workflow, de processo de trabalho, e sem uma integração com essa ferramenta, as pessoas, olha, em vez de trabalhar no meu sistema, vou ter de abrir um outro, fazer aquilo, trazer para dentro, e assim, como funciona isso? Como casar isso? Então, nas novas ferramentas que vêm sendo desenvolvidas, o importante é que haja essa integração com o sistema de workflow que a gente já tenha, e que ela ofereça mais esse é o grande desafio, ofereça mais do que o Word da Microsoft oferece, que é uma ferramenta muito poderosa, muito amigável, que as pessoas estão acostumadas a usar. Então, você tem de oferecer a elas mais do que aquilo que elas já têm. Então, esse desafio é o que deve orientar, no meu entendimento, o desenvolvimento dessas ferramentas. Então, esse é o escopo, normalmente, do trabalho, o espírito das ferramentas que o Senado vem tentando desenvolver.
Thank you so much, Danilo, for your considerations. Tahir, would you like to share your thoughts on this question, on the comments the colleagues shared as well?
Yes, thank you very much. I just would like to add, no doubt, there is always a pressure on the legislative drafters to do quickly and prefer one request over the other because members are always in a hurry. The pressure cannot be swallowed except with the help of digitalization, because there are reasons and there are methods which a drafter has to follow. Drafter cannot assume and have everything in his mind all the times. He must have to be equipped with the digitalized equipment so that if there is a need of such type of urgency, because if I quote my example, in the current week, 2 members parliament sat in my office and at their demands, I believe you me, I was constrained to draft 9 bills in 2 days for them, for both of them. And for a single person, there are sometimes situations which are not humanly possible for a person. And this is the technology which can bail out from such situations for a human being. So I feel it is the need of the time. When you have a repository, when you have authenticity of the data with you, then you can quickly respond to them just to reduce your pressures. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tahir, for your comments as well. I'd like to invite Mark Stodder. Mark, would you like to share your thoughts on this question?
Sure. Just, I think so much of what we're talking about involves, the technology term that gets used so often is change management, where you think about, well, at least there's a couple of us on the call who, as Danilo has said, have been through technological changes and evolutions where, and even going back further to living through the changes from mainframes and dumb terminals and then word processing and so forth. And now today, where there's opportunities for web-based tools that can draft as structured data and can enable all kinds of other very important advancements in the legislative process. But I think at each point, those of us who've been through those changes have seen where adoption has struggled and where the case has not always been made to make that change, to make that advancement. And perhaps sometimes technology has tried to go too far too fast or has missed the mark, I think as one of you talked about. And that can often leave the users frustrated, annoyed, thinking, why are we going through this again? We've seen cases where the head of legislative IT or the drafting office will say, we're not going to change until after I retire. I don't want to go through that again. And so if, obviously that's a failure point. And if you're not figuring out a way to manage that change, to point out and to create concrete benefits early on and early wins, then you're not going to succeed in this. And again, these are mission critical tools. You can't have them fail. You can't have them not work when you have the leadership of the House pushing you to get a bill across, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it is about carefully managing that change and not just upgrading because you have a budget to upgrade.
Thank you so much, Mark. A colleague just made a comparison on describing this process you're mentioning, that it is to change the tire of your car with the car moving. So you cannot stop the legislature to make this change. You cannot stop once, not along twice or 3 times. So of course, I totally agree with your comments here. I'd like to invite Wade to share his thoughts as well.
Thank you. And I was also moving in the direction of change management. The technology that we use, the paper that we use, does not have emotions. The people who are using it are emotional beings, and managing that change I see as the biggest challenges. And so some of the things that we have tried to do and that I know we need to do as we look ahead is to really identify what are the important traditions and processes that cannot be changed as we are working around them, and kind of developing a strategy so that everything we do inside that strategy is moving in the same direction, but then we need to act tactically. And so it's really important to work in a desired order so that we're being consistent and we're not having to undo something that we have previously done. It's also important, where at all possible, to see if we can combine a benefit that users and members receive with some cost, because there's almost always a cost that comes with change. And so, I see that as a real challenge. And so I think that is as responsive as I can get in my allotted time.
Thank you so much, Wade, for your response and for being on time as well. Mark, I'd like to bring you a question. It's a tricky one, I have to admit. To merge the knowledge of a technologist and a drafter is, to say the least, an unusual trait for a person to have. And that makes a powerful ally in the digital transformation process of the drafting areas in legislatures, both national parliaments, national congresses, and subnational legislatures as well. My question to you is, in your view, what are the recommendations for a legislature to give its very first steps in modernizing its drafting process? And what kind of transformations, and by transformation, I mean in strategic terms, in mindset terms, as you were saying, in other using other terms, and of course, in legislative systems that you would recommend for the colleagues?
Thanks, Luis. Well, yeah, it's a complex question. And I think the simple thing when a legislature, and particularly a drafting office, embarks on modernization is to make sure it understands why it's doing it, and to really think hard about the specific reasons it wants to move ahead with changing its technology, moving toward greater digitization. Is it because the existing tools are breaking? That's a very common thing, particularly with a lot of the old technology that is still in place in legislatures around the world. Are there higher goals of greater accuracy in the process, greater efficiency, creating more sustainable systems that can last and work through time and be built upon through time? But you have to ask those questions, really hard questions, particularly when there is, as we've talked about throughout the discussion here today, all kinds of pressures coming from all over the place, from members, the public, and so forth, clamoring for some kind of modernization. Sometimes it's not particularly well defined, and sometimes it's misplaced. We've heard throughout the conference reports from representatives of parliaments around the world where sometimes they're moving forward with digitization in some nations where it's not entirely clear it makes sense, given where the public is, lack of connectivity, literacy issues, things like that, where is a fully modern system really the right way to go? Maybe there are steps to take, which leads to a second point I would make, which is that you have to identify in these projects, in digitization projects, the early wins that you can make, the things that will make the most difference right away. We've had the honor and privilege and great pleasure to work with Wade's team in the House, where they have identified, even though there's many things to move forward and many systems that can be modernized, including drafting tools and so forth, but they have identified some key early wins involving greater transparency to the process, in ways that members and the public now can see much more clearly what is happening, for example, with bills as they proceed through drafting stages, or how amendments can be seen within legislation. There are some ways to create greater transparency right away without fixing the beast of technology that's behind it. And once you can start to get those early wins, then you can get everyone moving along with you, and you can clarify your goals, understand even better why you're moving forward in certain directions in digitization, and then take on some of the bigger challenges bit by bit. So I guess those are my general thoughts on that. And it really comes down to making sure you understand very clearly why you're moving forward with digitization.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your response. And Wade, would you like to share your thoughts on this as well?
Yes, thank you. The early wins are important. And the important question then behind that is what leads to an early win? And identifying the forces, the pressures that are coming to bear on why the change is desired is really important. Related to that then is identifying and finding the members and other staff you're working with who are champions for what you're trying to do. And to build small and to work out with those champions the strategy and tactics I mentioned on the previous answer, because all of that leads into a more positive change management experience. So in a nutshell, that's what we did, and with Mark and his team's help. Very important to marry the technology side with the people side. And that champion is important because it's hard to remain on schedule. You need a funding. It's not easy to get funding when there are so many competing needs and desires. And things don't always work the first time as intended, and you need somebody who's going to stand with you while you work through the challenges in that kind of development. So thank you.
Thank you, Wade, for your response. Danilo, would you like to comment and share your thoughts as well?
Obrigado. Ponto que eu queria levantar, nossa experiência do Senado, em que essa ligação da tecnologia ou dos tecnólogos com os redatores legislativos, responsáveis pelo processo em si, se dá em torno de um grupo de servidores dedicados ao Senado, ou seja, servidores efetivos de tecnologia, que, ainda que adquirindo ferramentas externas ou outras, eles vivenciam o processo legislativo de forma que esse diálogo com eles é mais fácil. Eles conhecem o processo internamente, eles vivenciam esse processo e, ao mesmo tempo, eles são capazes de entender melhor nossas necessidades a partir disso. Então, acho que isso é algo que ajudaria na parte dessa pergunta, que como iniciar, né, como pensar na digitalização dos processos. Acho que ter um corpo próprio de servidores dedicados a isso é uma ajuda. E outra eu acho que assim, uma coisa que a gente deve ter como experiência na pandemia, que impulsionou muito a necessidade, ou seja, se estamos na iminência de uma crise como essa, se soubéssemos que estávamos na iminência, teríamos nos preocupado em digitalizar e tal. Então, assim, a experiência com a pandemia, eu acho que deve nos impulsionar para estar certos de que a digitalização é uma necessidade e é algo essencial para o futuro. São esses dois pontos que eu queria levantar.
Thank you so much, Danilo, for your comments as well. I'd like to invite Luiz Afonso to share his thoughts. Luiz Afonso.
Perfeito. Acho que as questões que o Mark coloca são bastante importantes sobre como começar, né? Mas também, como o Danilo acreditou, a pandemia nos empurrou isso à força, né? Eu praticamente vi toda a transformação tecnológica mais recente acontecer na Câmara de Porto Alegre, onde eu estou há 43 anos. E responsável. Eu vi os primeiros computadores chegarem aqui, né? E devo dizer que, na perspectiva, já vimos uma discussão inicial sobre o processo legislativo eletrônico, mas eu devo confessar a vocês que eu também tinha algumas reservas em relação a isso, tinha algumas preocupações, mas não no sentido de que eu aderisse ou não, eu sempre fui muito apreciador de tecnologia, mas em razão da cultura, né? Em razão da cultura. Bom, mas voltando ao que o Mark disse, nós agora, se bem que nós aqui, o Mark, nós estamos numa situação inversa, né? A gente tem o desejo, nós temos uma experiência inicial, nós temos um corpo de servidores jovem, aberto para isso, mas desculpem eu bater repetidamente nesta tecla, né? Nós não temos tecnologia ainda, nós estamos à procura de tecnologia e não temos aqui ainda uma tecnologia que possa se dizer confiável e embora a nossa cidade não seja uma cidade rica, nós não teríamos problemas orçamentários para adquirir essa ferramenta, mas ela ainda não apareceu para nós. É isso.
Thank you so much, Luis Afonso, for your considerations. Tahir, would you like to share your thoughts and close this round?
Yes, thank you very much. In addition to all these comments regarding digitalization of, no doubt there is no disagreement over that the process of the parliament should be digitalized. But at the same time, if I think as a drafter, then I feel that it will also add in efficiency and error-free legislation by the drafter. Because if I quote a short example, last year, a member parliament approached my office and with the request to draft an amendment in a specific law. He was holding an old version and outdated statute. For the same time, the amendment was already passed in the act in the 2020. I just astonished to see that book in his hand. I asked her, the said amendment is already incorporated in the updated law, but he was adamant and was not accepting that. When I bring that book from the library and showed him that your desired amendment is already incorporated. But at the same time, if I was aware of the law, fortunately or unfortunately, at the same time I had gone through that law and I was having knowledge about that amendment because it was passed through my hand and I have gone through all the process. That's why I was in a position to advise him because it is already incorporated. We have not to bother for the second term. So such type of embarrassing situations conclusion is that such type of embarrassing situations can be avoided through the modern techniques if we have a authentic laws repository and data bank available with us. Then we can go through evaluate either the desired amendment is already in the law or not. We can find the way through a single click over there. So that's why I feel, in addition to the process as described by all the panelists, there is also need of the data or digitalized form for a drafter. Being a drafter, I just try myself to prescribe the pains of a drafter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tahir, for your comments and your answer. I'd like to proceed to our final question of today's debate. And Wade, that goes to you. And traditionally, the last question of each of our debates, we try to have a glimpse of the future, not the coming months or not the coming years, but the coming decades. My question to you is, what kind of technologies and features would you like to have available in the future, let's say in 2032, to say in 10 years from now, that would improve the effectiveness of the drafting offices and at the end of the line, the effectiveness of the drafting process in legislatures?
Yeah, my very, very short answer is an integration of data sets and the ability to collaborate more effectively. In getting there, it's really important to keep in mind what we've already been mentioning about change management. It will be as much a people problem, if not more, than a technology problem. Looking for the natural happenings in the legislature and society and being able to take advantage of that. We've mentioned the generational change. That is also happening in our office. And we mentioned the one-time events, the pandemic, and that drives us. So as we are thinking in advance, we can be better prepared to take advantage of those. That then leads us into, as we are building the tools, the members and the public need to have confidence in what they are receiving. So data integrity and data security is going to continue to be very, very important. A loss of confidence means a loss of trust, and we are then going to be in a world of hurt. I also see us moving away from email. So in the US Congress, we deliver our product primarily by email. And I see in the future having a document located in the cloud and us changing access into some kind of a permissions-based system where I have access for a certain amount of time in the legislative process. And then I am frozen out until the next appropriate part of the process where I have a role. And so coming up with a scheme to manage that seems to me to be overwhelming, but that's the job of the technologist. So, I definitely think that's possible. And then it was mentioned the desire to have something better than Word. We also have that challenge in that as we interact with our members and committee staff, they work primarily in Word. We are working primarily in XML. And the back and forth, the data translation, the copy and paste takes time, reduces efficiencies, and introduces errors. And working in the same kind of data, if that's at all possible, or having appropriate translation tools if we have to rely on that. But that will definitely be important for us. So in conclusion, as all of that happens, I also see that other data sets will be combined, video, allowing the public more access into the variety of kinds of information that inform the policy. Whether it's information relating to demographics or geography or really whatever the kinds of information that informs that decision maker will also help to inform the public. And if the public has more information and can be guided in appropriate conversations, more understanding can develop. And I think that will help us all go forward in a much more positive way.
Thank you so much, Wade, for your considerations. Tahir, would you like to share your thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, thank you. If we will talk about the time frame about the adoption of the digitalization process, I would like to go back 2 years back. Before pandemic, there was no concept of virtual meetings or digitalized meetings, especially in our parliament. But due to the time and environmental restraint, we used to of that and adopted that methodology. So keeping in view that there is only the need of desire, as Wade just said that there is need of desire to adopt the technology. If we have adopted it under constraint of the COVID, despite of the fact it was under some constraint, but we have used and adopted that technology. All the committee rooms, initially there was an attempt to hold the session of the parliament on a virtual add Zoom or other some software, whatever that will be available with the assembly. But they supposed to and manage for that. If they can do that in 1 or 2 years under some constraints, then if there is a will, they can adopt it at any moment and just go. This is launched and you have to go through it, and the people will learn it. The technology is not. I believe technology is not teach to other body. It is just learned and adopted by somebody. So you can adapt with that technology if you have no other option to use that. So their time frame cannot be given for the future till when one can be adapted. It depends on the sweet will of any person. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tahir, for your response. I'd like to invite now to share his comments, Luiz Afonso. Luiz Afonso.
Bem, eu vou ser bem rápido. A perspectiva que eu teria para daqui a 10 anos, em 2032, é que ela se chama transparência. Aumento da transparência. O que significa isso? Significa permitir que cada vez mais e mais cidadãos possam ter acesso ao processo legislativo na medida que ele se desenvolve. Ou seja, os cidadãos, através dos sites da casa, enfim, poder acompanhar para e passo o processo legislativo no momento em que ele está acontecendo, né? Porque eu acho que o Wade falou isso, né? O processo ele fica fechado durante um tempo, né? Você pega o resultado, pega o início, mas não há um acompanhamento. Então, sucintamente era isso, a minha perspectiva, e enquanto estiver aqui eu vou trabalhar para isso, não sei quanto tempo vou tomar isso aqui, Danilo, mas, eu, na verdade, eu já estou aposentado até, mas continuo trabalhando. Mas a minha perspectiva é contribuir para que nós tenhamos um processo transparente, que os cidadãos possam não só acompanhar, mas também interagir com esse processo.
Thank you, Luiz Afonso, for your considerations. Danilo, would you like to share your thoughts on this as well?
Obrigado. Eu compartilho da visão dos meus antecessores, também tenho essa expectativa de mais transparência, mas o que eu queria em 10 anos é que o meu trabalho em si fosse muito impactado pela tecnologia. Em vez de ocupar parte do meu tempo na redação de projetos da forma que traduza a melhor forma possível a intenção do legislador, que eu possa trabalhar focando nas melhores mudanças, nas melhores medidas para aperfeiçoamento da legislação, junto com os parlamentares. Ter um trabalho mais de aconselhamento, de discussão com eles sobre o mérito, sobre o desenvolvimento das políticas públicas, do que a confecção do texto em si, que eu espero que em 10 anos seja muito mais fluida, mais transparente, mais fácil e mais até feita sem tanto treinamento técnico, né? Fosse uma coisa mais intuitiva e mais amigável. E aí sim, vamos nos concentrar no que a legislação precisa para ser aperfeiçoada, no que as medidas precisam ser que realizem melhor o fim social delas. Então, essa seria a minha visão de futuro, junto com as dos colegas. Obrigado.
Thank you, Danilo, for your considerations. Mark, would you like to close this last question with your comments?
Sure, happy to. Luis, I know you felt like you were asking us a huge, crazy question about try to envision the future 10 years from now and with legislative technology. We do have to remember that most of the systems that are in place around the world today have been there for longer than 10 years and sometimes decades. So, and we have one project where we're replacing a system in place for 40 years. So in some ways, the answer to your question about where things will be in 10 years could be pessimistically, well, pretty much where they are today. But I think things are moving much more quickly than they have been. Technology is pushing us, the public is pushing us, members are pushing us to faster than before. And we also are seeing funding appear here and there in certain jurisdictions to make things happen. So things will change in some jurisdictions, many of them. And I agree with Wade's vision that I'm hopeful that we get to a point in which we are reflecting the technology inside legislatures is reflecting the technology outside legislatures to a certain degree. And that would be thinking about data and thinking about connected data sets, structured data, so that the laws are not in all kinds of different forms, but we have adopted standard data structures so that they can more readily link to regulations to other data sets so that we can have a much better vision of what we are doing. The drafter can have much greater control over as he or she is working, knowing that as they make this amendment, they can much more readily see that's affecting 15 or 100 other points in the law. And I think it's vital that we get there so that we can draft better law and we can better reflect the views of the policymakers. But overall, my hope is that, as others have said, that the changes that are coming in 10 years and where we'll be in 10 years is that we'll have systems that are much better connected to citizens, that are much more transparent, that are building, as Wade said, that confidence in our institutions that, as we see today in many parts of the world, are getting kind of shaky. And we're seeing democracies struggling a bit. And so much of that struggle is coming from difficulties with the truth and difficulties with facts and difficulties understanding where that source of truth is. And government needs to take, and legislators in particular, need to take a central role in promoting the sources of truth and making them available to the public and to citizens so they can be connected, so we can maintain confidence, so citizens can see how a bill becomes law and understand that and see the process and what's happening, that it is fair, or sometimes that it isn't, so then citizens can react to that. So all of that, I think, is part of what I certainly hope we see in 10 years. Yes, some of those mainframes will be retired and new technology will be there, but I think we have great opportunities to do even more as we look to the future.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your closing remarks. Before we end the debate, I'd like to invite each one of you to share any final thoughts very briefly, so we can be on our time. And I'll do it alphabetically. Danilo, would you like to share any final thoughts on today's debate?
Eu queria simplesmente agradecer novamente o convite. Foi uma honra compartilhar essa mesa com os colegas. Aprendi muito e também me identifiquei muito com as questões levantadas pelos colegas e ficar à disposição para futuros convites também da Bússola Tech. Agradecendo novamente e cumprimentando a todos. Obrigado.
Thank you so much, Danilo. Luiz, Afonso, would you like to say any final thoughts on today's debate?
Bom, eu gostaria de agradecer a oportunidade, mais essa oportunidade, e dizer que aprendi muito hoje e vi que grande parte dos problemas, guardadas certas proporções, eles estão espalhados pelo mundo, né, das questões que a gente enfrenta. Então, eu vou dizer que foi muito proveitoso para mim e dizer que foi um prazer estar com todos vocês aqui. Esperamos que a gente consiga a evolução que todos desejamos para o processo legislativo. Muito obrigado.
Thank you so much, Luiz Afonso. Mark, any final thoughts?
Sure. Just again, many thanks to Bússola Tech for putting this together, and also to the great interpretation team. It really has worked so well. Thank you, all of you who are working hard. And also thanks to all the panelists who every time we do these, I, as others have said, learn so much, but it also is just so exciting to see the different things that are happening around the world and the common complexities and common challenges. And I think it is these kinds of forums make us better, give us better ideas, and also help us understand that we're not alone and that these things are happening in all corners of the planet. And so I look forward to the next time we can get together, and I hope that's not too long from now. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Mark. Tahir, would you like to share any final thoughts?
Yes, thank you so much. I just would like to thank to all of you, your team, for providing me such opportunity, for making my evening such beautiful in the presence of such wonderful panelists and learned fellows across the world. I am highly obliged for providing me such opportunity. Grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Tahir. Wade, would you like to share any final thoughts on today's debate?
Yes, I want to thank everyone for participating, for Bússola Tech for putting this on, and it is so comforting to know that we all have common challenges, And a very important part of the solution is that we continue to have the conversations, look for ways that we can work together. It's one world, and it's very important that we proceed as such. So thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you. We usually say that our debates are just a first step to increase collaboration between colleagues, legislatures, and everyone working to help parliaments to modernize.